Good morning, everyone. Let's get started. So, we will be seeing multiple new ideas in today's lecture, or rather, so the ideas that were introduced earlier, but we will take a deeper look into the same ideas. The first one I would like to get started with is revisiting the go-to statement that we have seen in the last class. So the program here, it prints a table. It asks the user which table you would like to print, and depending upon the user input, the program prints the corresponding output, the corresponding table on the screen. This program we have seen in the last class. So just to see, ECC, you run it. So the table gets printed on the screen. And if you see here, the code for printing the table, you can write it using a for loop, you can write it using a while loop, or you can write it using the bare bones go-to statement. If you observe the commented code from line 11 to line 17, what we are doing there is, before we are entering the while loop, we are initializing the variable I to 1. And on line 13, we are checking if I is less than or equal to 10. If this condition is true, then we enter the while statement. You print a line of the table depending upon the value of I. And after the body of the while statement gets executed, you go back to the beginning of the while statement. And again, when we go back to the beginning of the while statement, again the condition is checked. So let's see. So, and if you see the statements, the codes written, the equivalent code that is written from line 19 to line 26, this is what it, how it works. So this I is equal to 1, the statement is equivalent to this I is equal to 1 here. We are initializing the variable. And then before we enter the while loop, we are checking if I is less than or equal to 10. If this condition is not true, that is if I is greater than 10, then you want to come out of the while loop. So coming out of the while loop, in order to make it make this more apparent, I can kind of say here we have a statement labeled L2, for example. This is a dummy statement. Just I want to make create a greater equivalence between the while statement and the if the code written using goto statement. So equivalence right now. So here, so yeah, so this statement here is equal to this statement. And on line 13, we are checking if I is less than or equal to 10. If I is greater than 10, you want to go out of the while loop. And that's what we are doing here. On line 22 to 23, so what we are effectively, these two statements are equivalent to checking no, while I less than 10, something like that. If this condition is false, then the control doesn't go to the go-to statement. Instead, the control goes to statement 24. And statement 24 is nothing but statement 14 in the while loop. And similarly, statement 25 here is equivalent to statement 15 in the while loop. And there is an invisible go-to statement at the end of the while loop, and that go-to statement is explicit on line number uh, uh, 20 on line number 26 here. So here at the end of the while loop, there is an invisible or invisible or implicit go-to statement. And so after when this line number 26 is encountered, control goes back to the statement whose label is L1. So the label L1 is associated here with the statement here. This is empty. So essentially L1 is associated with the if statement. Let's say if I is greater than 10, then this go-to statement gets activated. And when this go-to statement gets activated, control will go to statement 27, statement which is there on line 27. Because on line 27, label L2 is present. So there is an equivalence between this while statement and a bare bones C code, which uses just go to statements and if statements. Similarly, you can create an equivalence between for statements and the code just using if and go to statements. So the important observation here is in the C programming language, even if for statement is not there, even if while statement is not there, still you will be able to write all the programs. But the for statements and while statements make your code much more cleaner. It is easy for an end user to read your code cleanly. Are you all with me? I see there are some small doubts uh, on like whether we should be putting semicolon on line 27. I think these are minor syntactic issues which the C programming language requires. And these minor syntactic issues you should look at the book and get the clarification. But the principle that I want you to appreciate here is that there is an equivalence between whatever you can do using for statement, whatever you can do using while statement, you can do the same using a combination of if statement and go to statements. So there is a question. Let's see what's that question is. So there is a question, what if we remove the semicolon after L2? The C language compiler, C language standard says you cannot have a go to an empty, to a label which doesn't annotate, which is not attached to any statement. That is the C language rule says. Why is it? That's what the language rules are. Just like in English, you have some rules. Uh, in Hindi, you have some rules. All languages have rules, right? Similarly, here also, the language has some rules. So, So Abhinav has an alternative code suggestion. I think, see, you can play with these go-to statements. This is the basic logic. You can rewrite this code in different ways also. You can rewrite this code in different ways. Yeah. So your point is well taken, Abhinav. So you can rewrite the code in different ways. So some of these questions, I see some questions here. In order to answer them, I want to take a different route to answer them, these individual things. See, there are, I created an equivalence between the while loop and the code from line number 20 to 27 here, but there are different ways of doing it. And you should try them out. Okay, you should try them out and see what are the different ways of mapping a while statement to an equivalent sequence of statements using goto and if. One thing I want you to appreciate, though, that's what I want you to pay attention here is if you take a program, so what the execution model that we have learned in the first two classes of this course is when you switch on a processor, what the processor does is, so this is your memory, and your memory is a sequence of bytes, and your memory contains data and instructions. And what your processor does is, it fetches an instruction, it decodes the fetched instruction, and then it executes the fetched instruction. And then control will go back. And the instruction that is fetched, it depends upon the address that is present in the program counter register. So there is a register called as PC register in the processor, and whatever the address that is present in the program counter register, that's what will be used for fetching the instruction. So usually if the instruction is an add instruction, let's say if your program is like this, you have an add instruction and your PC is pointing to this. Okay, maybe this add instruction is present here. So after the add instruction, maybe you have subtract instruction. So what happens is the control keeps going forward one instruction after another, and there will be a change in the control only if there is a what is called as a jump or a branch instruction. And these jump or branch instructions, they result from these goto statements. Like for example, the goto statement here may cause some kind of jump instruction. Okay, and this jump instruction may say jump to the instruction which is present at this address. So internally what happens is the processor executes this instruction, this instruction, this instruction keeps going. And when it hits the jump instruction, depending upon the address that is given by the jump instruction, the control will go to the instruction, the corresponding instruction. This is how the processor works. And you have to use these instructions, and you have to use these control transfer instructions in a clever way to realize the logic that is present in your algorithm. So here if you see, so you have the bare bones goto statement. The semantics of goto statement is very simple. Go to L1 means go to the statement whose to which the label L1 is attached. That is the semantics of the goto statement. And you know the semantics of the if statement. So think of these as two Lego building blocks that are given to you. And what kind of program that you would like to construct, what kind of logic that you would like to realize using these two constructs is up to you. And the same logic, algorithmic logic, you can probably accomplish using slightly different codes. Like for example, if I gave this problem to you, and each of you may come up with slightly different versions of the code, which realizes the same thing. All right. So now let's take a look at, I am going to show you assembly code. I really want you to just pay attention to what I show. Otherwise you will get lost, and those things which I asked you to ignore, please ignore, because otherwise we will just be taking a different path tangential to the main point of the discussion. So please pay attention to what I highlight. So in order to, let's see, if you want to generate assembly code, so you have to use GCC minus capital S option. Then what happens is the assembly code, the code which is closer to what the processor can understand, it will be generated in a .s file. So here print table go to .s. So print table go to .s. And you can see on VS Code, it has this tag which says it's an assembly code. Yeah. I want you to pay attention here to two jump statements, to two control transfer instructions. On line number 37, if you see line number 36, there is a compare instruction. Don't try to understand what all this, don't worry about it at all. There is a compare instruction, but what line number 36 is doing is, it is checking whether I is greater than 10 or not. It is comparison operation. This particular I greater than 10, this expression is mapped to this particular instruction which the processor can understand. And then after that on line 37, you have jump greater than instruction, JG. So when the processor, after executing the instruction on line 36, it goes to line 37, and so the JG instruction, it looks at, yeah, let me use, so this instruction, this kind of goes within the processor. It makes a note whether, no, for example, I is greater than 10 or not by setting some flag in some, let's say there is something called as a flags register. In that flags register, it encodes, it puts either true or false. And the way it puts true or false is just by, false is 0 and true is 1, something like that. Some kind of encoding it will use. So the result of the comparison operation, it is stored in some kind of a register. And then on line 37, the processor goes and looks at when the JG instruction is executed, jump greater than. So the processor checks this flags register, and it will know whether it is set to true or false. And if it is true, then you can see control goes to the instruction which is labeled L7. Okay, so these labels are internal labels which the compiler uses when your C program is mapped to assembly code. Okay, this L7 you didn't use it. Okay, but the compiler used it. And other thing that I would like to make a note is if you go to line 26, there is go to L1 statement. That is go back to statement L1. So if you go see here, the equivalent to go to L1 is jump back to L1, jump back to the instruction which is labeled L2, and that is go to the compare instruction on line 36. So whether you use while loop, whether you use for loop, whether you use go to statements, finally everything gets mapped to a sequence of arithmetic instructions which does the computations, and control transfer instructions like unconditional jump and conditional jump instructions, etc. Like for example, here this is a conditional jump instruction, JG. This is conditional jump, and this is unconditional jump. And these are called as control transfer instructions. In the absence of these control transfer instructions, your program your processor executes one instruction after another only in the forward direction. So if that the instruction on line 38, it's not a control transfer instruction. It is a memory transfer instruction. So actually this moves data from memory to a register or to a register in the processor and vice versa. And then you can see on line 39, you have a multiply instruction. It's an arithmetic instruction. Okay, so on and so forth. Anyway, so you don't need to worry about these instructions. But what I want you to understand is the processor follows a fetch, decode, execute model. And when it hits a conditional uh, jump instruction like on line 37 or an unconditional jump instruction on line 48, then the control can take a different direction instead of a mere forward direction of flow. Are you all with me here on this one? So Lakshmanan, so actually compiler does lots of interesting optimizations. It really doesn't matter whether you use goto statement or whether you use while loops. In fact, it is better to use while loops because when the compiler sees a while loop, it knows more about the structure of your program, and it can use that structure to generate better assembly code. Rather than if you use goto statements and realize the processor, the compiler doesn't quite understand that you are trying to write a while loop. And in the process of translating it into equivalent assembly code, it may not be able to do quite some interesting optimizations. So in fact, I would say it is better to use for loop. It is better to use while loop because the compiler knows that what you are trying to do, and it helps the compiler to do some interesting optimizations which are otherwise difficult to do. That's true, exactly. Okay, awesome. So this is, I think this core point that we have discussed now is extremely essential. You need to get a complete grounding on this. So this is, there is a programmer's models. When we write programs, we have some kind of model in our mind, and how it gets mapped when it goes to the machine. So this understanding we need to have. Okay, shall we go ahead and so there is a question. Let me take the question. Someone raises the hand. Max.c. Yeah. So what is that max.c? So yeah. Sure. So I will take a, yeah. So that's what I will do next. So actually it's more than max.c. So how scanf, there is some problem. How scanf, what happens under the hood for scanf and printf? And that question is being raised in the context of max.c program. Yeah. Okay. So I will get to your question. So now we will take a kind of bit detour to completely understand um, the question that is raised in the context of this max.c program. So the question that is being asked is that how do the computer knows that that until we press the enter key, uh, the input is not supplied to computer, to the program, and how things work along these lines, the question is asked. So I use that question to uh, take a little bit detour, but still that detour is a kind of very worthy detour, I would like to believe. And so let's start with the printf, and then we will go to scanf, and so you will get a complete understanding of what is happening under the hood. Okay, again, so pay attention. I may kind of hand wave answers to some of your questions so that we don't digress too much. So what happens is, yeah, so you have this completely super simple program where we are doing printf. So this printf is a library call. Okay, in order to see, like for example, let's see. So GCC, it is printf syscall dot c. When we execute it, it just prints hello one. So there is a command called as ltrace, and this ltrace command tells you all the library calls which your program makes. Like for example, now I am doing an ltrace on this a.out. So when we do an ltrace on this a.out, so there will be two outputs. One output is the output of the a.out program itself, that is this hello one with no new line character. And the second output you can see is this printf. This is output of the ltrace program. And what the ltrace program is telling is that you are calling the printf function, library function, with hello one, this string as the parameter, and the printf function is returning 7. And why is it returning 7? Because it is printing 7 characters onto the screen. So hello has 5 characters, dash is 6, and 1 is 7. So it is printed 3. Yeah, so there is this question, why 3++? So it's just what ltrace is doing. It's not part of the hello one. It's not the part of the a.out output. So the output, yeah. So this is the output. This is also the output from the ltrace program. Where is the 7 characters? Hello one, yeah. HELLO is 5 characters, dash 1, it is 7 characters. So let's say if you have one more line, hello 2, then again if you, sorry, I have to recompile it. So ltrace. So if we do an ltrace again here, we called 2 calls to printf, and in order to make it interesting, let's say I have just hello one line. So I will come to your question, Yash. So just give me a minute. So yeah. So you can see on our program made 2 calls to printf, and in the first case, when we call printf for the first time, it printed hello one on the screen, and it returned 7 as the return value, and 7 characters are printed on the screen. And in the second case, printf did again, it printed hello on the screen, and it returns a number of characters printed onto the screen, which is 5. It returns 5 as the return value to the user. And this return value in this particular program, we are ignoring them. We are not using them. Not an issue. It's okay. We can, in C, we can choose to ignore the return values. What happens actually is when you make the way things work is, so as a programmer, you're calling printf, but internally what happens is, so this is your operating system kernel. So this is your Linux kernel. Linux or Windows kernel. So this is your Linux kernel. So what happens is your program is executing here. At some point you called the printf function, and the printf function, what internally it does is, in order to be able to access the screen, okay, display screen, whatever it is, it cannot do it by itself. It has to make the use of the operating system. So the printf statement, what it does is it calls a read system call, or in this particular case, write system call actually. It calls a write system call. It makes a call to write system call within your kernel. So when you make a call to printf, your printf library call gets translated into a request to the operating system. And this request to the operating systems, these are called as system calls. And after the write does its job, control comes back to printf, and then after printf gets executed, your code will execute as it is. So this is what happens. This is what happens when a printf, when we call printf. The printf calls the write system call, and after the write system call is done, control transfers back to the printf, and your program continues executing. I didn't get the question of Lakshmanan. So why would we use this over GDB? Where is GDB coming into picture here? I'm not sure where GDB is coming into picture here. Maybe I'll take that question later. Are you all with me here so far? How printf works? At some level, because you have to abstract at some level. Printf makes an operating system call called as write, and after the write does the actual job. Printf is just not for debugging. No? Sometimes you want to tell the user enter some number or something like that. We use it for debugging purposes also, but it is not purely for debugging purposes. No, ltrace is, you can quickly get what is happening in your program by using ltrace. You will get a quick, these are all different tools which you can use to get in different contexts. There is one question, would the OS call occur even if you take input from a text file? Yes, but I would like to defer giving a detailed answer to that question. The system call still happens. In fact, your program doesn't know that you are even reading from a file when you use the redirection operator. So when you use this redirection operator, your program even doesn't know. So in the last class, we have seen something like ./a.out less than test.text. Your program even doesn't know that the input is coming from the test.text. It's very interesting thing happens. So, but I would take this question maybe at a different point in time, not now. So now let's see. Now let's try to do an strace. Again, when we do all the system calls made by the program, we can find out using strace. Again, now I want you to keep this in mind. Don't try to understand everything that gets printed on the screen. A whole lot of stuff gets printed on the screen. Just focus on what I point. I'm doing an strace now. So ignore everything. Just focus on the line that I'm highlighting here. So your printf call got mapped to a write system call. Okay, you are telling the printf is making a request to the operating system via what is called as a write system call, and it is passing this hello one string to the write system call and asking it to print it. Are you with me on this one? And the write system call, after printing the string onto the screen, it returns back saying how many characters it has printed on the screen or on the device that we asked it to print on, and it turns out to be 7, which is the number of characters in the hello one string. And the one that you are seeing in the write system call, it is what is called as, that one represents what is called as a standard output. Are you with me here on how a printf system call in turn makes a write system call to the operating system? That one is what is called as a standard. So in C, there are 3 things which is called as standard input. We will revisit this again, which is kind of numbered 0, and standard output. Then you just use that one here indicates its standard output, and there is what is called as a standard error. This is 2. So these are called as descriptor numbers. Let's not worry about them. But broadly speaking, this one is nothing but what is called as a standard output. So now let's take one. So now let's use 2 printf statements. One is hello 1 and hello 2. So let's compile this code. So GCC printf strace dot. So now I really want you to pay attention, and very, very interesting observation on the line I am highlighting here. So your 2 printf library calls, they got mapped to only one write system call. Printf internally buffered. So printf, when you made a call to printf, it didn't store, it didn't immediately made a write system call. It internally stored hello one in its internal buffer. And then after that, you made a printf hello 2, it again internally buffered hello 2 in its internal buffer. When the program is about to exit, then know what it did is, you know what, I better print it on the screen. So it made a write system call. Are you with me on this one? This is very, very important observation, that how 2 printf system calls got merged into one write system call, and the write is doing a print of 14 characters on the screen. Frame has a good question. I will answer that question, but I want to see if you're all with me, that how this is a question. Printf is internally buffering the thing that we would like to write on the standard output internally, and it is merging 2 printfs into one write system call. It depends. There are good question, Pramod. I'll answer your question in a moment. Again, for the sake of clarity, so this is an extremely simple program where we are calling printf 2 times. So the printf library call is called 2 times. But what printf is doing is, printf function has an internal buffer inside it. When you made a call to first printf, printf for the first time. Let's say this is your printf function somewhere present. So when you made a call to printf, it stores your hello one internally. It doesn't print it on the screen. You make a call to hello2 again. So and then again it kind of stores hello2 in the internal buffer. And later on it notices that we are about to exit the program. So printf flushes whatever it there that is on in its buffer onto the screen by making a write system call. Are you with me here? Fflush forces us to call a write system call. Fflush forces a printf statements to make a write system call. How many of you are with me here so far in today's lecture on this printf part? Or you're happy so far? Okay. So the first part, so I will explain the flush part in a moment. So let's put /n here. Okay, let's put /n here. Exactly, Pratyaksh. So Pratyaksh got it nice. So printf intelligently merges things to reduce total number of syscalls. Great, you got it. So now if you put a printf with on line number 5, we have /n, and let's see what happens. GCC. So there are questions, some interesting questions. I'll answer those questions in a moment. So now when you have a /n, what is happening is printf, it's not waiting for it kind of at that point itself, whatever that is there in its buffer, it immediately writes it onto the screen by making a write system call. So if you see here, so because we have kept /n here, printf, we are forcing printf to make a write system call. Are you with me on this one? How /n in a printf is forcing printf to make a write system call immediately. Or in order to make it clear, for example, maybe I can have this /n. So how many system calls do you think it will make? How many system calls? So hello1 and hello2 will be merged and one write system call will be made. And hello3, why we are not merging hello3 with hello2? Because /n forces the printf to make a write system call. So let's compile and see if our understanding is right. No, /n and space, they are not similar, Varshita. So /n is, yeah, for the sake of printf treats /n differently than space. No, not any escape sequence. Only /n will do the magic. So let's do an asterisk here. Yeah, so as you rightly noticed, guessed, so you can see the first two printf statements, they got merged to one system call. These first two, 5 and 6, they got merged to one system call. And since /n is there, no, printf is not trying to merge hello and hello3 into line 6. And after that, it is using one more write system call to print on the screen. So what's the question? Can't you just write? So these are all semantics, Kishore. When we are designing a language, oh, what happens with that printf? It will make one write system call. The code which. Okay, so I think let's not. There are quite interesting questions. See, there are certain language semantics that are being language standards or semantics that are being designed for whatever reasons. Some reasons we understand, some reasons we don't understand, but that's what the language semantics means. I recommend all the questions that you have. I recommend that you should explore them. Okay. People are getting kicked out. 121. I don't understand why they are getting kicked out. Not sure. Okay. So here is the deal, guys. So this is a kind of teaser for you. So some level of what happens under the hood. And I gave some insight. Uh, but obviously there are several questions you will have, and I want you to explore them. I want to explore them, and you tell me what is going on underneath, and you share, you come back to me, and you come back to your friends and explain, no, I tried this and this is what happened. And is it all right with you? Because I want you to give a basic framework to understand. And there are multiple questions, very valid questions. But I also don't know answers to all of them. We should just try out and figure out how the system is responding, and from that we will learn. Is it okay if I kind of pause my discussion on printf here and move to scanf? Are you happy enough to move to the next part? I do appreciate your questions, but we just have to try them out and see how the system responds, and from that get the semantics. So before I move on, so just before the class, I searched about this printf. So just I will post this link also on the course website. Please read this. So printf statements sends output to an intermediate storage called buffer. Yeah, this is on Stack Overflow. We have to double check it. We have to look it from a standard place. Every now and then the material in the buffer is sent to the screen. The standard C rules for when output is sent from the buffer to the screen are clear. It is sent when the buffer gets full. This is what I told few classes back. And it is sent when a new line character is encountered, and it is sent when there is an impending input. That is, if there is a scanf after a printf, then also that has to go out. Like for example, here, let's see if I have a scanf here, scanf %d %n. This is the case which we didn't check. So here on line number 6, there is no /n, but there is a scanf on line 7. So the scanf on line 7 will force the buffered output to be flushed onto the screen. Okay, so let's see if that happens. Yeah, if you see here, yeah, you can see now here, the write system call is called because of the scanf statement here. we are forcing the printf statement to put hello one on the screen. And now this also sets the tone for us to go and see what happens when we do a scanf system call. As you can see, your scanf system call, it gets mapped to a read system call. So right now, the program is in the operating system. It is in the operating system. Okay. And so you can see here 0. 0 stands for standard input. 0 stands for standard input. A read system call, scanf gets translated to the read system call with 0, which is a file descriptor number. 0 means standard input. So now we will take a peek into how scanf works. And it looks like we will not have time to look into arrays in today's class, but it's okay. Yeah. So now let's look at scanf. This program is extremely simple. We are reading two variables n1 and n2. Dot. I'm doing it. Yeah. First, let's do an ltrace on this. Yeah. So when we do an ltrace on this, pay attention here. So let's say here 12 and 13 I have entered on the screen. Then you see scanf successfully read 12 and 13, and it returned 2, indicating that it read two inputs from the screen. All right, guys, you're distracting me from the chat. Okay. So yeah, for fun on the chat. So pay attention here. Are you with me here on this ltrace? What happened just now? So there is this thing that is getting printed. So your scanf statement, it is saying that the scanf statement that got called is this. And don't worry about all those, whatever that is there on the screen. Right now, let's say I'm entering, in order to make it clear, I'm just saying 12, 13. These are the two things that I'm entering. So scanf is returning with saying that I successfully read two values. And that's what is expected of the scanf. Okay, we are reading two values and they are getting the return. So let's say if I press A, then it returns 0 because it is trying to scan an input which matches a integer from the input keyboard buffer, but it encountered an A, so it failed and it returned 0, where 0 is the number of inputs it is able to successfully read. Now let's try one more. So now let's say press 12 followed by A. What do you think scanf will return when I press 12 followed by A? Yeah, it returns 1 because it is able to successfully read 12 and A doesn't match. So that's what happens. Great. So now you understand what is happening with the scanf statement. Are you all with me here on the scanf statement from at this level? Are you happy? No, there is this question. Someone raised a hand. Let me. Please go ahead, Rajarshi.
So can you show the code again once, and can you explain it a bit once more?
So what is the purpose of scanf?
So to read inputs from the user.
Yeah, so in this particular case, scanf, we want to read two inputs from the user, two integers from the user.
Yes, sir.
So the scanf does two things. One is it reads input and stores them in the memory locations associated with the variables n1 and n2, number one. Number two, it returns a value. The value it returns depends upon how many inputs it is able to successfully read.
Yes, sir.
So now let's go ahead and see. So those of you who are bit lost,
So then why does 13 show 2? The first one.
let's run this code again. Okay. GCC scanf is called .c. Sorry. Let's do an ltrace on this. So the first case is the most common case I'm giving. Common case, or no, like I'm giving supplying two inputs, 12 followed by 13. So what
Yes,
will
sir.
happen? 12 will be stored in the variable, sorry, 12
N1.
stored in variable n1, 13 will be stored in variable n2, and scanf will return 2 because it is able to successfully read two input values. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So now that's what happens. You can see here, it is saying it is returning 2 because it is able to read two values.
Yes. So, but in the last time we read it, we only typed in 13, but we still got 2.
No. I think you may have missed it, seeing something on the screen. Now let's say if I just print, if I just press it 12 and scanf is still waiting, okay, and then if you press 13, then what happens is so we are out of the scanf and two values are read, and that's what scanf is written. There are questions. Shashwat.
So thank you, sir.
Shashwat.
Sir, I wanted to ask, what are the hex codes as arguments in the ISOC
No,
99?
don't worry about it. So
Alright.
whatever, just focus on what I'm showing. So there could be many things going around. Let's try to understand only a few aspects of it. You figured that out, Shashwat. So try
Okay, sir.
and understand what it is. Okay, good question though. Okay, now let's do 12 and A. So now 12 is successfully read, but A causes a problem. So scanf returns 1. So now let's do A and 12. So now the scanning stops as soon as scanf reads A because it is expecting an integer from the input keyboard buffer. But it encounters an A and it returns a 0. And let's see what if we go more than two inputs. It's not going to affect any way because scanf successfully reads 12 and 13 and it ignores the rest of the characters that are present in the keyboard buffer, which will be supplied to the next input reading routine. Are you all with me here until this point? So if you are all with me here, then we will go and see what happens under the hood, that is what happens at the operating system level. So now let's see strace dot. Yeah. So you can see that this scanf translated called read system call. So now we are in the read system call. So now let's say if I press 12 and 13, so you will see something very interesting. So if I press 12 and 13, yeah, pay attention here, guys. Very interesting. This is the line. So the read system call returned to the scanf statement this thing that it read from the keyboard buffer 1 2 space 1 3 followed by new line character. So it is supplying a string back to the scanf, and scanf takes this string and maps the string into a sequence of two integers, that is 12 and 13. I'll answer your question, Harshit. Are you all with me on this particular example? That when we made a scanf call to scanf called read when whatever the characters that we have typed in, they are returned as a sequence of characters, ASCII characters to scanf, and scanf uses that sequence of ASCII characters and converts them into integers and stores them. Are you with me on this particular idea? If you are with me on this particular idea, then we will exactly. So all the spaces slash n, they are read by the system call, but they are ignored by the, but they will be processed by the scanf. Whatever that we are typing on the keyboard, it will be read and supplied to the scanf statement, including the enter key that I have pressed. Yeah, we typed the enter key and it went to the scanf statement. This 12, 13, this is what we have. Let's do it again. So let's say I am typing in 43 and 56. This is what I am typing in. And when I press enter, 43, 56 and enter key that I have pressed, it is being supplied back to the scanf statement. And this 1024, as I said, don't worry about it. It is the maximum length of the string which the read system call can send it back to the scanf statement. It's a memory size, that's true. And 0 is the standard input. And 0 is the standard input. So now let's see, let's keep going. So let's say if I press 12. So now what happened? Again, something very interesting is happening. I just pressed 12 and pressed an enter key. What the read system call that did is on this line, pay attention here, on this line, it supplied this back to the scanf. But scanf is not happy because it is looking for two integers. It is able to extract only one integer from the input stream. So it made one more system call. Are you with me here? How one scanf statement is mapping to a sequence of two scanf statements, because in the first case I just pressed 12 and entered. So the read system call returned back this string to scanf. But scanf is not happy because scanf wants to read two integers. So it made one more read system call. So now I press 13. So now scanf is happy because this 13 is returned back to the scanf statement, and scanf got the two integers that it wants to read, and it's great. Are you all with me on this example, how it thinks? Okay, let me see, let's go to the program again. The program scanf wants to read two integers, right? Scanf wants to read two integers. So what it does is, when we made a call to scanf, scanf made a read system call. And we passed only one, I pressed it 1, 2 and enter key. So the read system call, it returned on this line, it returned 1, 2 followed by /n to scanf. Scanf read, if you go back to this code, so at this point, scanf read 12 into variable n1. Are you with me here? Till this point? The 3 is very simple. The number of characters read, 1, 2 followed by /n. There are 3 characters that are read. So you got 3. So now let's say I enter 1, 2, 3, 4 and followed by enter key. So now you can see read passes the string 1, 2, 3, 4 back to scanf, and it returns 5 to scanf, saying that the length of the string that it read is 5. And if you go back and look at the code here, clear all my drawings. let's see. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4 will be present here. 12 is present here. So, Kishore, I'll answer your question in a moment. But are you with me here on this house? A single scanf statement has got mapped to a sequence of 2 read statements. Are you with me on this one? So let's try one more thing before we move on. Let's say strace a dot out. I'm pressing A. Okay, this is so now what happens is this. If you see again, whatever that I have pressed A followed by /n, this is written to scanf. And what happens is scanf internally, it looks at the buffer AAA, and AAA is not, it's not able to convert AAA into an integer. So it immediately comes out of the, no, it doesn't try to process the keyboard buffer anymore. And so it returns 0 because it's able to process only one, it's not even able to uh, extract even one integer from the input keyboard buffer stream. Are you with me on this example, this one? This last one, why when we press AAA, so what happened is that is it is read doesn't, the operating system, all it does is it just takes the raw input that you have pressed from the keyboard and sent it to the scanf, and scanf is trying to parse it and trying to extract an integer. It is not able to do it, so it returns back and it says, you know what, I'm not even able to read even one input, so it returns 0. So I think this is how scanf works. This is how scanf works under the hood. This is how scanf works under the hood. So I want you to use these tools, strace and ltrace tools, to see what is going on, to see. No, it did count all AAs. No? So when we see AAA/n, whatever the things that we have typed in, it I didn't get your question, Pratyaksh. I think it's everything is as expected. So the read system call, just whatever the raw input that you press on the keyboard, it will be supplied to scanf, and scanf tries to parse it. I want to conclude this lecture, today's lecture, with one thought, which Kishore is bothering me for the past 10 minutes, asking the same question in different ways. So that is what happens is when you make a scanf call, the process goes into, this code is extremely simple, Rajesh. Nothing, we're just reading 2 inputs, that's all. So that is what happens is when you make, when the program it is executing, at some point it made a call to scanf, and because of the scanf, it went to the read system call, and the process is waiting for the input. When the process is waiting for the input, it doesn't require any processor cycles. It doesn't, only after the input is available, the next set of instructions the processor can execute. So what happens is the operating system puts this process into what is called as a sleep. So the process earlier is in running state. It is in running state. the processor moves from the running state to sleep state while it is waiting for the input. So after it gets the input, it moves from sleep state to running state back again. So in order to understand this, so let's see the same thing. Let's dot/a dot out. So the process is now waiting for the input. So let's see what is the process ID associated with a dot out. Yeah, so the process ID associated with a dot out is 27035. So Kishore, can you tell me what is the command to check the status of the process? There is PSU. I forgot the command. Oh, sorry. Something happened. So I'm just trying to find what is this. How do I find the status of the process? Here are all my drawings. Yeah, so if you look at a dot, yeah, can you, if you see this brown line, you can see that a dot out process is in sleep state. This S capital S indicates the process that is associated with a dot out is in sleep state. Why is it in sleep state? Because we are waiting for input. So no processor cycles are being consumed by that process. So after we enter the input, what happens is the process will come out of the sleep state, and then again the process will continue execute. So this is the concluding thought for today's lecture. And if there are, what I, needless to say, like there are many possibilities you can think of, many different scenarios you can think of. And all the questions that you are asking is, okay, what happens under this case? What happens under this case? Those are all valid scenarios, and we just have to try them out and see how the system responds. But what I want you to understand is how you can use the stress tool and how you can use the LTRIS tool, and how you can kind of get some insight into how printf works, how scanf works. So this is what I wanted to give an insight into in today's lecture. So with this, I conclude today's lecture, and if there are any questions, I will take them now. But just want to do a quick poll. Are you with me in today's class? Are you fine with today's lecture? Is it interesting, today's lecture? Is it good? Are you happy? You should try out some of these experiments by yourselves and get a feel for what's going on. Good, good. Please try out. So if you have any problems, it's TA. Please take the help of TAs. You can. I'll also be there to help clarify the doubts in the evening sessions. But you should experiment a bit on your own and try to think and see what is going on. Every Friday evening 6 to 7:30 I will be there on, but on every evening 6 to 7:30 TS will be there, right? So Shubh has this nice question. So there is this interesting thing. Okay guys, now the class is concluded. So if you want to leave, you can leave. Yeah, so if there are some questions, we can try them out. Run off this. I think I should stop recording.